Welcome back to another episode of Successful, the podcast.
I'm one of your hosts, Blake, and joining me,
I'm one of your other hosts, Justin.
And this is the podcast all about the not so subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in pursuit of it. Let's not waste any more time and get right to the show.
Hey, Justin, are you excited for our second episode?
Blake, first of all, I'm incredibly excited, and I'm even more excited because the intro there, flawless. That was so good. You sounded so professional. You sounded resolute. You sounded commanding.
Oh, wow. All right. Go me.
Well, I think I did it right. Can you?
Wait, nope. I messed up.
There we go.
Oh, that was as far as I could go.
I find, but I can't yet. We got so for those that can see the video, we've got the cutoff. We've got the
We're
cool background, but we're in our box. So, but this show is about coming outside of that box, right?
Yes, it is.
It
is absolutely about that.
Yes. So how are you? Are you excited, Blake?
I'm super excited, and I think our background is awesome, and I think you're awesome, and I think our topic today is awesome. You want to tell them what it is?
In a second. Hang on. I got to tell you, I didn't notice this last time, but the cactus behind my head almost accentuates my hair. Do you see that?
It does.
That's weird. I didn't notice that before. So
I didn't either. That wasn't even on purpose.
No. And you designed this background. I freaking love it. I think it's fantastic. So actually, I'm going to let you lead with the subject today because I introduced last time.
Okay, fair enough. So today we're talking about finding our people and kind of debunking different aspects of that, which I think is a very interesting topic, especially now that a lot of people are moving into working from home, kind of the changes that go along with that. And there's been a lot of change in general in the last several months. But even specifically with finding your people, working from home, and the way that is changing things, the way technology is changing the way that we communicate with people, how we meet people. And I think it's just an interesting topic to discuss, considering that, as you said before, Justin, Americans often say that we're self-made, and we're not fully self-made. We always end up having the help from somebody along the way. And so with this new technology that's happening, these changes, working from home, that kind of changes the way that we interact with people, right?
Absolutely. An awesome summary. So let's take it real for a second here, since we always like to talk about entertainment. So how this subject came up was we were talking in general about this. And one thing that entertainment does do very well, in good ways and bad ways, they communicate the heck out of everything. All business in life, seems to me, in my experience, has been about connections and who you know. That is true. But there's no place I've ever worked aside from Hollywood that it's 100% relationship based. Like, you can get a $5 million loan, but if you've got a better relationship, you can probably get a $100 million loan for something. That's how intense relationships are. And so we started talking about what a great subject this would make. And just, it's so relatable on so many levels, because like you had said, Blake, like working remote is hard for a lot of people. And the idea of being an adult and finding your people, your community, can be hard.
Absolutely. And I especially would say, just going back to the entertainment industry here for a second, that obviously networking and knowing people is important in all industries, but in the entertainment, there's such a big emphasis on that, because most entertainment stuff also can't be done with just a tiny group of people. Most movies, you look at the credits and there's so many people attached to just that one movie. And so it kind of puts it in perspective, and it really puts a focus on, I guess, the downsides of that. And in Los Angeles, it's weird. You're surrounded by people all the time, but it's still hard to meet people and to have more of a relationship than just like surface level, or just like, oh, hey, how are you? And that's it, And it's different too, because a lot of my friends in Los Angeles, it's like, oh yeah, I'll meet up with you. I'm available next month on the 21st at 2:00. What about you?
And it's so commonplace that you don't even bat an eye at it. But the minute you leave that, you're going, okay, that sounds kind of insane. Like,
right?
How can you be that busy? But it's true. And I think that we need to get away from that a little bit, right? Because the story that you told about the dog, which I want you to tell about here in a second, I think is hilarious in LA, because that's totally true. But like, one of the things that I find as an adult is, I live in Texas. And one of the things that's funny about Texas is, in LA, you very rarely find a LA person, right? Like, they're all transplants. And so the nice part about having a ton of transplants is that you don't know people usually. And so if you do, one or two, so most people tend to be a little bit more friendly because they want a community. They want a group of people they can hang out with. And so it tends to be not necessarily easier to find your people, but it's more because everyone's doing it, it's more acceptable. Whereas I find now, when I first moved here, it was so funny. I live in an area called Katy, which is right outside Houston, and it's like very old school Texas, where, listen, I went to school here. I went to A&M. My family's from this area. All my friends moved home. So look, I'll be friendly and nice to you, but I don't really need any more friends. Whereas I'm like, I've never had that feeling. Like, I've never had that idea of like, there's too many, I just can't, it's just too many in my life.
I've never had that problem. I don't even know what that would feel like.
It's not natural. I'll tell you that much. I've never been anywhere else where it just seems like, look, I don't really like change. I'm not into change. You're from a totally different coast than me. You seem very nice, but look, I'm not up for that change. And as more and more people have moved here, obviously that's been dispelled and it's been great. But I'll tell you, the first couple of years, it was very weird because I had two things working against me. One, being from LA, like that does not help out here.
Well, and it's so obvious too. You've got the hair and like you look very LA.
I do. And even the way I dress, all that kind of stuff. And it's not purposeful. It's just my style. And the fact that I've never worked here. I got placed here to redo a company, but I was always traveling and all over the world all the time. And so those didn't help. But then eventually we broke the code and got in. And now, it's pretty funny to see this because all of my really close friends are not local. Like, they're all people that are, from other places. And we all talk about the same story, which is great. You can commiserate that, which I think is so important about finding your people, that you can have those kind of moments, right?
Absolutely. And it's good to find things that you can kind of relate to as well. Los Angeles is a very lonely city despite all the people there. It's funny because they always say New York is like where everybody who's rude and whatever. Actually, you have more conversations with New Yorkers on the street than you do in LA. And going back to the dog story. So I got my weenie dog when I was in Los Angeles because I wanted to get a dog and I wanted to go hiking and I wanted a dog that would go hiking with me. But I also thought that was going to help me meet people in LA because people are so dog centric there. Oh, and so I get my weenie dog and he's like a little puppy and I'm carrying him, and you come to find that even when he was little, everyone will come up and approach you, but they have full conversations with your dog. And it's like, I find myself now that I've left Los Angeles that I still have conversations with the dogs instead of the owners, because it's just it's just how it is. It's just how it is there.
It totally is. And it's one of those things that you don't expect. Like you said, you got a dog, you expect to speak to people, and you just don't. I'll tell you a totally emasculating, embarrassing story about myself, since, this is the truth-telling moment in a show. When I first left LA and we had a pug, this still makes her just giggle. She's like, I can't believe you did this. I'm like, I don't know what the hell came over me. But anyways, we came across this other dog. I had no idea who this dude is. And they started, doing that thing where the dogs sniff each other's faces and they kind of do whatever. And I said, out of the blue, looks like someone needs some morning kisses. And I'll tell you, that was not a way to make a good friend. He looked at me like I was absolutely just the weirdest dude on earth. And you already look a little off. Like, what the heck? Okay, no, we're done. We're not going to be friends. I never saw him again, by the way. But yes.
That unfortunately is not uncommon, actually. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've met in Los Angeles that I've even had full conversations with. And that's like, I never see them again. And it's weird. And it's almost like you would think because it's such a networking centric place that you would always be like, oh, let's exchange Instagrams or let's exchange phone numbers. Half the time we don't remember. It's very weird for such a networking centric place. It's just not a natural thought. And I don't really know why that is. But I've now had to make a point when I go to like film festivals and things like that. I have to remember, okay, we have to make an effort to actually do this or we'll all forget. And it's so funny because there's always this moment in the conversations, right, where everyone sort of remembers that fact. And so you'll all be talking in this little circle and it's awkward because everyone's trying to like get to know each other and say things and not be that one person who's standing there like awkward and silent. And then there'll be this lull in the conversation where everyone sort of looks at each other. And then somebody will finally pull out their phone and be like, oh, we should all join each other's social media. And everyone's like, oh, yeah. And they just grab their phone out because it's such an awkward moment. But it's so weird that that's such an awkward thing to do. Like, it should feel natural, but it doesn't. And I don't know if that's just my generation, But like, do you have that problem?
No, so I think that's a hilarious. I mean, you can probably tell by my face. It's hilarious because it is something that happens and it is weird and it is awkward and I don't know why, but it always is. Especially like when I used to go to conferences all the time. So I'm not good with names for whatever reason. I can memorize a face, but I'm horrible with names.
Same way.
And so I'm usually when I meet someone for the first time, especially at like a networking event or a conference or whatever, I try to get their name right away and put it in my phone so that I don't forget. Well, this conference had like 5,000 people at it. It was huge. And every day you sat, basically there was like a security line to get in. It was a huge thing. And like, I couldn't find anyone once you get inside. So every day you basically sat with someone else, but then you go have lunch with other people. And I felt so bad because this woman that I met the first day, there were 5 of us going out to lunch that day. And she shows up and all during lunch, I'd put her in the phone, but I'd forgotten her name. So I had her name. It was in my phone and I felt like such an ass all during lunch because I was like, yeah, you're right. And she's like, yeah, tell us more, Justin. I'm like, yeah, you're doing. And finally she was like, you don't know my name, do you? And I'm like, I know your name. I have it in my phone, but I just can't recall your name. And she was, thank God she had a good sense of humor. She goes, well, you're not winning any personality awards today. However, here's my name again. And we all had to go back on our phones and you could see everyone kind of scrambling and finding each other online to figure out, okay, yes, that is who you are. So yes.
See, the putting people's name in my phone thing doesn't help me. I have to like see the face. So that's why using social media is the best way for me. And it's funny because I think a lot of filmmakers are like that because we're visual people. I actually, when I go to these networking events now, because I'm the same way you are, I just take the mystique out of that and just flat out say, hey, I'm Blake. I'm horrible with names. So every time you see me, I will recognize your face, but I will not remember your name. So don't take it personally. And they all laugh. And then after that becomes a game because usually they'll be like, hey, I'm Jessica. I'll be like, hey, Jessica. And then they'll leave and come back and be like, hey, I'm Jessica. And eventually it's like, you're Jessica. And they're like, oh, you remember my name. And so it becomes this whole thing.
That's a good way of disarming. I like that. I usually am, I guess, shy to that fact. Like your approach is probably 100% right thing to do. And I'm going to try that. I'm usually the guy who's like, and I think part of it is too, because I stand out so much. Usually not a lot of people look like this, right? So I'll go somewhere and I kind of stand out and most people kind of blend in. And so I feel really bad when I don't know their name, they know mine, and then they act like we've known each other for a long time. I get kind of annoyed by that. I met you 2 days ago. They're like, how do you not know my name? I'm like, dude, seriously, give me a break here. And if you do it again, you're going to be known as Karen. Okay.
Well, that gets into a different topic too of, I don't know, I'm one of those people that oftentimes I'll meet someone and they decide we're best friends right off the bat. And then they'll tell me that several months later. And I don't know how to react to that because it's not reciprocated yet. And so it's kind of just like this awkward, like, oh yeah, you're awesome too. And then it's like almost they expect you to say something else. And I'm always that person who's just like, standing there silently because I'm not sure what to say. It's weird. Like I can get along with most people. I can go and have conversations. I can be a social butterfly if I want to be, but I'm still a really private person. And so it's been difficult for me over the years to find my inner circle because I am so private. It takes me a lot longer to consider somebody like a best friend or whatever. And I have like, I don't want to say certain standards because that kind of sounds like, I don't know if standards is the right word, but like, I guess I have a certain amount of time that needs to pass. I need to feel a certain way about the situation in order for me to have that with somebody. And that's been something that's been a struggle for me over the many years, especially in the entertainment industry, because you're supposed to meet so many people all the time and everyone acts like they're best friends with each other, even if you've just met. That's a very LA thing. And it's, for me, uncomfortable and awkward.
It totally is. And I'm going to pull a thread on something you said a second ago because I think it's going to help a little bit. Never feel bad about having standards about people who you have in your life, right? Like that is never... You should always feel good about that because there's so many people that will like suck your energy or take it. You just don't really want to be around. So you got to be selective in who you have around you. I think it's important. I always get nervous around people that hang out with like 5,000 people all the time. I'm always like, why are you not picky? Like, why are you like doing that? Because to me, that sounds insane. I think I'm very picky. And we joked a couple days ago that I've always said I've got like a moat, a castle, an alligator pit, a lightning rod, all these things to get to the inner sanctum. And you were kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of the same way. And I don't know that's a bad thing, but what I do think it is it takes more to establish trust. That's the piece I always find because I'm supposed to like, one of the things that I kept getting all the time in college was, And I felt so weird about it. They're like, you would be so great high. And I'm like, how do you
people
respond
say
to
that to me too, but I don't know what that means.
That's where I'm going. Like, is that a compliment? Is it an insult? Or is it just like, hey, you should get high? Like,
I don't know. Are you telling me that I like have a stick up my ass? Is that what you're telling me? I don't understand.
it's weird. Well, I'm glad that's a story I did not know that. So I'm glad we share that. So let me see if I can do it again. High five. Well, I went out of frame.
I went the wrong way again.
It's okay. Blake, you'll get there. Okay. Just like with names, it takes practice.
That's true. That's true.
So
Well, I got a funny story. You're talking about like having the moat and all that and people who hang out with 50 billion people. So I met up with a friend. This was like several years ago now, but I met up with a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time. And we did the whole catch up thing. I was like, oh, how are you doing? And they were like, oh, I've been good. I'm really happy living. I have my house and my neighbors and all my friends. And I'm actually having a party this weekend. I'd love for you to come since you're in town. I said, sure, whatever. Through conversation, they tell me that all these people at this party are like their best friend and they're so close and all this stuff, right?
Of course.
I get to the party and it was so awkward for me because they had told me all that and I get there and I'm like, oh, how do you know so-and-so? And oh, I met them last week. Oh, and you would think that would be like one or two people, right? No, the majority of the people at the party were people that they had just met recently. And I was like, am I the only one who has a different definition of what that means?
It's weird. So no, you're definitely not the only one. For me, like we've got a mutual friend of ours, Eric. Eric is the social butterfly of social butterflies. He floats from person to person. He will remember your name, everything. He's the opposite of both of us in that regard, in terms of he's great with names and all that stuff. But he is notorious for doing that. We used to do it all the time. He'd be like, oh, this is my best friend. I'm like, dude, we hang out all the time and I've never seen this person. And he's like, no, I just haven't mentioned her before. I'm like, really? Is that what you want to say? Okay, fine. We'll go with that here because I don't want to embarrass you, but all right. And it was just, it's weird, right? Like, so I think having those standards and being selective, though, is helpful because then you surround yourself with the people that are true friends.
Well, and I think that's the difference for me. It's like, I don't know, this kind of even gets into relationships. Like I used to say when I was younger that it's like all or nothing. If I'm going to get into it, because I was very like, my mom used to laugh at me because I told her, I was like, I'm not getting married until I'm at least 32. I'm not doing this or that. I was very decisive as a kid, even when it came to that type of stuff. Maybe that's because I'm a Capricorn. I don't know. That's like a Capricorn trope, but but I've come to realize over the years that I'm very selective with the people that I want to be around. And it largely does have to do with the fact that if I'm giving my energy to you, you're in that inner circle. But to me, the inner circle is not 20, 30 people. The inner circle would maybe be 3 to 5. And that's if you're lucky. And it's not because I'm like wanting to be snotty or anything. It's just that I need to have people in my life who match or exceed my energy. And if you drain my energy and that throws everything out of balance, that's a problem for me. Because then if you exhaust me and my energy all the time, it makes me not want to be around you. I'm also one of those people that I prefer authenticity. Even if you mess up, whatever, if you're honest with me, I'm more likely to be like, okay, we're still cool. You lie to me. And it's really hard after that for anything to like move forward at all. Oftentimes you can't gain my trust back. So maybe that's why I'm the way I am. But I think it's important to find those people because your inner circle is supposed to be the people who you can go to and rely on, who aren't going to judge you, who are going to support you, but there's like a reciprocal dynamic there. And I like the way that you always talk about your relationships and how it needs to be symbiotic, because that's important. Because when you have these codependent relationships, it's always out of balance. And eventually that out of balance is never going to be sustainable. And eventually it's going to end.
Always. I think you're 100% right there. And I would say for me, and I'm a Virgo, so I don't know what this says about me, but I was very similar in that regard. And I use the analogy of the battery. So like, I want you to either charge the battery or at least keep the battery where it is. When I start getting lower and lower, I notice my energy can get sucked really fast. I can get depleted very quickly. And it took me a long time to realize it, but it was really about being around the right people. Once I figured that out, I don't feel bad about going to parties or other engagements and not doing small talk with some people. I'm like, if I get a bad vibe from you right off the bat, like there is a dude in this neighborhood. I don't know his name, but he and I run into each other all the time at functions. But we both just give each other a look like, I don't like you, you don't like me. And I'm fine with that. That saves me that extra conversation because I feel the exact same way. Now, years ago, I would have been like, what's wrong with me? Why don't you like me? I am not there anymore. I am beyond that. I'm just like, hey, you know what? I feel the energy. We are not reciprocating it. We're like two polar magnets you try to put together and then you just can't. That is perfect. And I think having that realization is helpful in life, because I think a lot of times people try to go for that opposite so much for whatever reason, whether it's they want that justification as to, why do you feel that way about me? Well, who gives a crap why someone feels the way they do about you? It's not worth your time most of the time figuring that out. What's worth your time is surrounding yourself with the right people and then not getting exhausted over things you can't control. Because one thing you talked about, great relationships, the other thing that they do is you can also be honest with them. They don't just charge your battery, but you can be implicitly honest and be like, look, this sucks today. Or you can have a bad day and you can talk it out with them and they're going to be real. They're going to listen, but they're also going to give you that perspective that's probably beneficial for you in the end. Whereas when you have 50 superficial friends, you don't really have anyone to talk to. You're kind of in this bubble. And I struggled with that for a long time, especially in college, because I thought, join the fraternity, do all these crazy things, you'll feel full again. It took me a long time to get out of that funk because I was doing all these things, but I wasn't getting filled. And what I finally found is it just comes down to the right people. What do I look for? And stay away from people that automatically give you that weird vibe.
I think it's an interesting topic that you're bringing up because it kind of gets into the idea of, and I think we struggle with this, and people who've come from the entertainment industry, especially those who are performers, come from this sort of, especially when we're younger, it's like you need that validation all the time. You need to be the center of attention to feel like a certain way. But it's funny because even actors who love their job, acting's still a job. It still requires energy. When you have to constantly act around your friends, that's exhausting. And then people wonder why they're so depleted all the time. Well, if you're acting all the time, you can't be your most authentic self. You're pretending all the time. And again, it's not sustainable. I definitely struggled with the same thing because I did the sorority life there for a while too. And I actually dropped out my senior year and was like, I'm not doing this anymore. It's still interesting though, because you kind of have to learn that self-awareness and have that self-worth and that self-confidence to kind of get away from that entirely. And I think it's not until you really end up being surrounded by the wrong people for a certain amount of time that gets you fed up with that you finally realize there's a different way. And I think part of it is when you're open to everything comes in, right? Nothing specific comes. So when that happens, you kind of like get into this mindset that you think there's nothing better because you're just allowing anything in. But when you become more selective and you start realizing, hey, wait a minute, this isn't as small of a group of people as I thought, it changes your perspective. And I think that also kind of gets into the other day, you and I had that conversation about finding your niche. And I had said, oh, well, if you do A, B, and C, I think your niche will actually be bigger. And you're like, well, that's a really small niche. And I said, is it? And sometimes it really gets down to your perspective about people and your perspective about how many of them exist and where they exist and how they exist. Because even in that conversation, it's like you're thinking, oh, this is a small niche, but then I'm telling you, actually, it's not. It opens that aperture, like you like to say, and it gives you that broader sense. And you start realizing, well, wait a minute, is it that the niche is really small, or is it that I never put myself in that niche to realize where it can lead me and how expansive it actually is? And that's the part that I think over the years I've had to learn as well, because especially in the entertainment industry, there's a lot of not nice people, obviously, in the industry. And so it's easy, especially in such a competitive place like Los Angeles, to get disheartened and think, oh, everyone's just an asshole. Well, is it that, or is it that you just haven't found the right people yet? And I think it gets down to that kind of perspective on meeting people. And I think it becomes really hard too, because that perspective is having to shift again with people working from home. Nobody knows how to meet people anymore. And people like me who are like, well, I'm not going to get on a dating app, or I'm not going to just reach out to some random person on social media. Well, how do you meet people? You don't want to go to a bar because you don't want to just meet people who drink, especially if you're ambitious. You want to meet people who are working on themselves and trying to do better, right? Well, where are those people other than these networking events? How do you organically meet people anymore? And that's, I think, a huge issue that's going around that's not really fully being discussed because nobody knows what the answer is.
Damn, you just dropped a insert bomb exploding sound. That was a knowledge bomb there. Boom. Man, that's a lot to unpack. I love that. I want to take it in two parts here. So the first part I would just say is being comfortable in your own skin, especially if you suffered from self-esteem. I think anyone in the arts suffers from self-esteem at some point. I know I have. Almost everyone I've ever known has in that field, because you do exactly what you said. You put yourself in the situation of, I rely on outside stimulus to make me happy. whether it's through judgment, interaction, reaction, whatever it is. And that is the death of fulfillment, I found out, because you never can gauge. Like, part of what killed me as a stand-up was the fact that, like, if I didn't get a laugh, it killed me. It was just devastating. It took me, 40 years to figure it out. But the idea was, I can't control what they're going to laugh and not laugh at. So I just got to do the best version of me. I know I killed it. Who else cares? And it's either going to work or it's not. And I think that's that attitude that a lot of people need. The other piece of it is that I think is so important is, so how do you meet these people? One of the ways that I found is you've got to say yes to the right things and no to the wrong things. So, like, you were labeling those things as the dating apps, the beer, the drinking, all that kind of stuff, right? That's perfect. So then you start thinking about, okay, what communities do work for me? What could possibly fulfill that need? And start exploring those, and then being comfortable in your own skin to say no to some of that stuff. I mean, my wife is the social butterfly of social butterflies. Like, she loves to coordinate. She loves to hang out with 500 people. Like, that is her. And it drives her nuts. She's like, you are a social being. And I'm like, I know I'm a social being. She's like, you have given a talk to 10,000 people before. I'm like, yes. She's like, why didn't want to go out tonight? I'm like, I just don't. I just don't. And we finally, after so many years, she finally gets it and she appreciates it. But I think understanding and having that, you don't want everyone exactly like you, but you need that yin and yang. You need that balance of people that are similar enough to you that, prop you up, but also the other people that are going to be real enough with you to actually be a good friend. Does that make sense?
It does. And getting to that kind of open perspective, right, where it challenges the way you view things. And it complements you, though, because I think you've made a good point. We've had discussions before about being complementary versus being opposites. Opposites often don't last because there's too much friction. But if you have the right amount of friction to where it opens up your eyes to things, opens up your mind to things versus it being an argument all the time, it changes and challenges the way you view things.
You're 100% right. The only thing I would add to that is it's also being open to that, because a lot of people aren't open to that piece of it. They don't want to have those deep conversations because they're either not mature enough or they're afraid of the reaction someone else is going to give them. And so it's also having faith and trust that with the right people, you can have those conversations and they don't blow up into, I'm never talking to you again. They may get heated. That's a human. We're emotional beings. We all have huge hormone spikes. It could be a good day or bad day. We slept like crap. I mean, there's a million things that go into it. But knowing that you can come back, whether a day or two later, and you're still as tight as ever, that's how you know what a good friend is. And if you're concerned with that, it's probably the wrong type.
I agree with that. And I think that gets to the idea of vulnerability as well, because I think the problem, especially with artists, because you brought that up before, is when you are in the arts, you have to be vulnerable in the sense that you're putting out, whether you're an actor, you're a painter, whatever, you are exhibiting these emotions that put you in this kind of vulnerable state. And especially when you're younger and you are just like open to all those different energies instead of being selective, you end up being vulnerable with the wrong people, which makes you less confident and makes you not want to continue being vulnerable, even though that's really important to your success. And it's interesting because I actually had this conversation with one of my subscribers the other day, and we were talking about how emotion is like, people think that you have to control your emotions all the time. And I always tell people, because we were arguing over that, they were struggling with their emotions and they were like, I keep trying to shove them down. It's not working. I said, well, that's not going to work, though. It's like a champagne bottle. If you take a champagne bottle and you shake it, eventually the cork is going to explode. But if you open the bottle correctly, the bubbles don't leave, regardless of what you do, whether you shake it or you don't shake it, the bubbles are there. But if you open up the cork and you pour it, you are controlling how quickly it comes out. You're controlling the pressure. And that's the thing, is like, when you're dealing with your emotions and being vulnerable, I think the key to it is to learn how to take that pressure off. And the only way you can really do that is by acknowledging your emotions. And the thing that people don't get too is that everyone talks about mindset and thoughts and communication being important, which they are. But what people don't realize is that the majority of those things are ruled by your emotions, whether it's conscious or subconscious. And so if you aren't in control of your emotions in the sense that you aren't working through them and allowing them to exist rather than shoving them down, and you're not acknowledging those emotions, your mindset and your thoughts and your communication get all garbled, because instead of pouring the champagne into a glass, it's exploding out of the bottle.
That's a hell of an analogy. I like that a lot.
I give myself props because I actually came up with that one on my own. Boom.
Well, shit. Can we do it?
I got it right that time.
Yeah. All right. So you're 100% right. And it's taken me a long time as a person to realize that like my vulnerabilities are actually some strengths. And it's weird to think that way, especially growing up in the 80s and that kind of thing. Like that's not what men did. One of the things that really hit home with me was probably in the late 90s. There was a great interview with Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And in their song Under the Bridge, they were talking about, and they needed basically a filler on their album. They needed another song, a slower song. And Flea was like, "Didn't you write a song?" He's like, "No, I didn't write a song." He's like, "No, read us this song that you wrote." And it took him like 3 or 4 days to come back to them and be raw and open, because they're a ska punk band. I don't know what you call Red Hot Chili Peppers, rock band. And basically he read the poem to them and they all cried, and they're like, "That is a great song." And it became, I think, their biggest hit to this day. And it changed his writing forever in that moment of his vulnerability. And for me, it hit home like, holy crap. Maybe that is a strength. Holding all this shit in is never worth it. Does everyone need to hear all of my stuff? No. But do I need a pressure valve of some kind? Exactly like you said. Yes. Whether you're a champagne bottle, or I'm going to be a little crude here for a second, because the one I always use with my clients is, listen, do you want to be holding in the fart or letting it out? And because there's nothing more uncomfortable. Here's a funny side story here. So I worked for this guy, and it was actually when I first moved here to Houston. And we're in this meeting, and it's the executive board meeting, and we're going over the budget for the year. And he's got his iPad. He's a little bit heavier guy. He's got his iPad in his chest, and he's looking at it. And you hear this like, brrr. We're all like, you doing okay? He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. And then he's sitting there, and then like 5 or 6 minutes later, hear this like, brrr, and he's like, we're all like, what the heck? That came out of a human being? And he just throws his iPad down and never came back. We had to basically, the next day, his secretary came in and got his, or assistant, sorry, came in and got his iPad, and he came back the next day, and we never talked about it. So I don't know entirely what went on, but that was a very raw, real moment. And to this day, it still makes me laugh. And he is so embarrassed, because we're still friends. He will never talk about that moment. But I think it's important to. And I think that those moments are what make us human. And I think that the idea of, do you want to be holding in something so tight that makes you uncomfortable, or do you want that release? And the release is the important part.
It's funny because RuPaul actually says all the time that your fear of looking stupid is holding you back.
It is.
And I think that is largely a problem, because even back when I was an actor, I hate as a person crying in front of people. So it was hard for me to step into that and cry even as a different character for a long time. And it was funny because this is an interesting story too, and I doubt my mom even remembers this, but I was very young. I think I was in middle school still. And she'd always been supportive of me being an actor, but she was kind of like, "Well, are you sure that this is like really what you want to do? Because it's not going to be an easy thing. You're going to have to work at it." She was like, "Are you really going to want to go on set and act every day?" And I said, "Well, right now, yeah, that could change. I don't know. But yeah, for now I do." And she said, "Well, how are you going to do that if you can't even cry?" I don't know what it was about that, because I don't know if she did it intentionally or not. We never actually talked about it when we got older, but she almost like challenged me in that moment. And she said, "Well, if you can cry, like do it, prove you can do it." And I remember like kind of staring at her for a second. And then all of a sudden I was just in a different character and I was able to do it. I was crying and like I acted, I think, like somebody had died. And I'll never forget the look on her face, because she was so taken off guard and so surprised that she like didn't even know what to say. But I think that's important, because some people would view that as a negative experience of like, "Oh, your mom wasn't supportive." I've never viewed it that way, because I think sometimes when you have your inner circle who gives you that kind of push and kind of pokes at your insecurities a little bit to try to get you to grow, I think that's important too. And sometimes those little conflicts end up making all the difference, I think, in your life and in your success.
I think almost everyone can look back at a moment that either challenged them and they either overcame it or they didn't. For me, those moments are pivotal. And I'm the type of person, when a challenge comes, I look it dead in the face and say, yes, let's do this. That's been my personality since I was a kid. I mean, I remember when I was like 13, my mom didn't want to buy me something. I'm like, fine, I'll get a job. I got a job. went out and got a job. And I know someone's going to say child labor laws. It was not bad. It was helping an assistant at one of my dad's friend's office. It wasn't hard. It was for 2 hours after school. So no big deal. But that's my mentality. It's always been that way. And it's funny because my parents, I am so different and I admire them for raising me, because my dad, like, his version of a sport was bowling. My mom was like a writer, and really, they're both kind of shy people in general. And I'm like this big personality, everything else. My whole life I've been that way. And I'm just crazy in a lot of ways. And I don't think they ever knew how to support me, like in terms of what I truly needed. But I think in a lot of their inability to do that, it helped shape who I became. And their belief in me in Hollywood and stuff was always like, well, you got to go to college first. It was never like, hey, take that leap, because they needed that security, right, for them. Whereas for me, I would have never gone to college if it was for me. They forced me to go, and then I went on and did all my stuff. And looking back at the time, was I ungrateful? 100% ungrateful. But I look back now and I say, thank you. Was it the right call? I don't know if it was or not. But what I can tell you is I did learn a lot from it. And I think those moments of grace, those moments where you get that challenge, and it goes back to relationships, right? It may not feel right at the time, but if you have trust in that person or their whatever love, if you want to call it that, it tends to be the right thing. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's interesting too, because when you find people who are going to help you grow, oftentimes they do make you uncomfortable when you first meet them because they put you out of your comfort zone. That can be difficult to do, stepping out of your comfort zone. Some people are more willing to do that than others. But oftentimes stepping out, it's like, I don't know, in order to grow, you have to go where you haven't been before. And that's the problem, is like most people, we want to, well, as a species, I would say we want to be comfortable, but being comfortable doesn't get us anywhere different. And so meeting those other people who make you uncomfortable, meeting those people who are doing better than you are at the time is actually good, because you end up learning from them, as long as that doesn't end up on their end where they end up being like a jerk. Because I will say one of my biggest struggles in Los Angeles was actually, ironically, women were very not supportive of each other, because for a very long time, and this is really, I would say, in any industry, not even in the entertainment industry, women have had to struggle and work really hard to work their way up. And so they have this mentality of, well, I had to struggle, I had to work my way up, so you should too. Instead of helping each other, I actually had more men in the entertainment industry who were supportive and helpful than I did women. And it's an interesting dynamic, because everyone wants to talk about sexism in Hollywood and all this stuff, which it exists, don't get me wrong. But I didn't have that problem. I had the opposite problem. I had a lot of women in my life actually who were doing better than I was. And it was a constant issue. And it was funny because one of the biggest things that I did out there, I was a producer for a company. We had a major studio who wanted to do a feature on an event they were doing, and they invited us there. Well, my partner at the time, she had to go out of town the next day. And she's like, oh, well, I can't go. I have, stuff to do. And I was like, this is like a major thing. You should go, or someone should go. And she goes, you go. So I did. And I brought Rob along with me, and we ended up doing the shoot. We did all the stuff, whatever. And after it was all said and done, we had a relationship with that studio after that. And my partner got mad. She almost didn't post the video because she was like, well, I didn't get to be there. And I said, no, you chose not to be there. You're going to post this video because we all put in a lot of effort. If you don't, it's actually going to look bad on you, because that studio is going to be like, well, what the F? And so she did end up posting it. But I remember it was like a whole thing, because when it finally succeeded, she was frustrated that she had no part in it, even though that was her decision. And it's interesting because I would say that's a problem for a lot of people, is they will blow off an opportunity for whatever reason. And then they're like, oh, well, I'm upset now because I didn't do it. You have to be in control of your choices and your decisions too, and take accountability for that. But it was interesting because we were all on the same team, and that's what happened. And to this day, she still will not talk about that video. It's still like sore spot for her.
See, I mean, that's a great story. And I would tell you that you weren't on the team. You may have called yourself a team. You may have said you were a team. That's not a team, right? Like, a team lasts. It's one of those things that it's not transactional. It's supportive. And this is one of the things that I do, particularly on my side in Justin Prust Inc., is getting through those barriers, because a lot of people think, oh, I've got the best team. oh, really? Let's talk about what they've done. Like, oh, so you are the one that works every Saturday and Sunday. Oh, yeah, because no, not yeah, because like there's no yeah, because flag on the field. Let's talk through this here and open up your eyes to the idea that a good team is where everyone is equal, and where when a situation like this arrives, they're like you take this, right? It's not whatever. Oh, good. You made a new relationship. Badass. Let's crush it together. Or that's yours. Fine. I want to go over here. It's complementary. And we're going to use that word again, but it's also what you said earlier. Come on, because it's the word of the day, symbiotic. You've got to have that camaraderie there and that trust that you can break through those bonds. And to make a subtle joke of what you said before, there was a great Family Guy episode years and years ago. And one of the quotes was that a commercial in the background playing, and it said, "Men, we know how to be friends." And it still makes me laugh because it is funny. Women are crazy competitive with each other. And I think it's just part of biology and everything. But I think as we get like more evolved and the world is changing so fast, I mean, the more we support each other, the more we help each other, the more we are less divisive and less stupid in terms of I'm right, you're wrong, the better off all of humanity is. And if, as we wrap up, I mean, just a couple additional bits of information and advice for everyone out there is come together. You may not agree politically. You may not agree ideology. You may not agree on politics, whatever. First of all, you should never talk about those things. Kidding. But like, come together. There is going to be something you guys agree on. There's going to be something, especially with family, and bridge that gap. And if there's something offline, take it offline. Like, don't even worry about it. Life is too short. And we are so divisive as a people that our strength comes from community. And I've talked about this many times, but the only reason we've ever been allowed to evolve to the beings that we are today is because of our humanity and that shared experience and being together. I mean, you leave a human being in the wild, unless you're Bear Grylls, you die. Something eats you, you get sick. I mean, you can't survive on your own. You need another human being. We are community creatures. So the next time you're caught in traffic or you're in line somewhere and you're like, God, this person sucks, why don't you change your thought? Because it ran into me today. I was getting donuts for the kids. I was like, God, what the hell is this person ordering? And I was like, nope, I just let it go. And I said, I've been in their shoes before, all these kind of things. I just let it go. And I got up there to order. I smiled at the lady and I made a joke about the lady in front of me. I'm like, that lady ordered a lot. She's like, oh my God, and it took that pressure off of both of us. And so the point of this is I think we just need to look out for each other more. We need to laugh a lot more, be selective in terms of who you put in your life, because it was funny watching you talk about that, about being somewhat reticent at the beginning. It was pretty awesome. Because should we, shouldn't we? No, I am of the belief that you need to be selective who you let into your life and who you spend time with and how you spend time with those people. What's the old saying? We're you can't choose your family, but you can choose your friends. That's true. So make the right choice and look out for yourself and the people around you.
Well, it's funny. I do have a couple, counterpoints to that. So I would argue, so my family, actually, we have a saying that you do choose your family. And the reason I say that is because I don't think being family is an excuse for bad behavior.
Ooh,
and there's many people in my life and in my family that I've completely cut out who deserved it. And I think it gets back to kind of what you said about being selective. I think my hesitation in the beginning was because I said the word standards, and standards has this sort of connotation to it where it makes you think that you have to hit A, B, and C a certain way, or they need to make a certain amount of money, or whatever. Being selective is the correct word. And that's why I think I hesitated, because standards is not the right word for me. It is being selective, because you can come from different backgrounds, have different opinions, and still have fabulous friendships. But it needs to come from an authentic place. It needs to have reciprocity in it. And then the other thing would be that self-awareness. A lot of it gets into the self-awareness because, like you said, you think it's more of biology, why women are competitive. I would argue that actually men and women are equally competitive. What it comes down to is that women have a lot of internalized misogyny that they don't realize they have towards each other because of the way that society has rounded us. And it takes that self-awareness to take that out of the game, because as I've gotten older, I have a lot of great, amazing women friends now who are more successful, or we're on the same page, or we're doing totally different things. But it's that perspective again, and changing that perspective. And so I would argue that's more of what it is, and your self-awareness in that really will help you move forward in finding the right people in your life.
Man, Again, we need that knowledge bomb drop in here. Like, holy shit. You had your coffee today. I love this, Blake.
I actually did have coffee today.
All right. And for those that don't know, she's not a coffee drinker. She's more of a tea person like I am. And so that's all right. You're fired up today. But I think the analogy of the family is pretty cool. I never thought about that. So thank you for that. And in terms of the verbiage, I think it's important to be selective, right? But I do think that with being selective, you have to have a standard in order to be selective. So it may not be the main characteristic, but below the line there, in order to be selective, you've got to have a standard set of some kind. Like, I will tolerate this, I won't tolerate that. And I love the analysis of the female perspective, which is something obviously I don't have. So I thought that was a really cool, maybe my inner sanctum. But
just giving you different perspectives. That's what we do.
Exactly. No, I think it's badass. I that actually really opened my eyes, and I was like, holy shit. It's 11:27 my time on a Friday. We're recording this, and I feel like we have zenned out. I'm moving the wrong hand.
I forgot it was Friday. I have to say, I feel like our points and our discussion's been really on point considering it's the end of the week.
Blake, let's not take down our stuff here. That just shows, imagine if we record on a Monday, I think our audience would their heads might blow off. You talked about champagne earlier. They are shaking that champagne right now, and they're about ready to explode. So we can't give them too much more, I don't think.
Fair enough.
We've had 2 knowledge bombs. I think if we go to a third, it's going to go nuclear.
Yeah, you might be right. Wait, it's a Friday. Let's not take it too hard on them this week.
Absolutely. But I got to say, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this episode. I thought we talked about a lot of fun stuff. Again, a ton of great stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I love this podcast. This is fun. And I think that we're making a lot of interesting conversation and topics, and hopefully it'll open up the minds of people listening and give them different perspectives as well.
Absolutely. I think as we edit this video, we do need to have that almost the outro to this one, because there were some deep moments here. So yeah, definitely listen to this twice, 3 times and be reflective and have a great one.
Well, Justin, as they say, all good things must come to an end.
Alas, they must. However, this isn't the end, because next week, same time, same channel, we drop another episode.
So get excited, because we're going to be diving deeper into all the topics of the not so subtle truth about success and
the art of sucking less in the pursuit of it. So join the conversation below, and don't forget to subscribe.